Halfway between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. is a hidden city, the headquarters of the National Security Agency, NSA. Here, tens of thousands of mathematicians, computer scientists, analysts, linguists, and voice interceptors work in absolute secrecy.
For those in the know, the joke was always that NSA stood for no such agency. For those on the inside, the joke was that NSA stood for never say anything.
NSA's job to secretly listen in on telephone conversations, email communications, anything and everything that might warn of plots to do harm.
The scope of what happens at NSA is mind-boggling. I don't think the average person can even begin to conceive of the staggering depth and breadth of what they have to do.
But was NSA doing its job before the 9/11 attacks? It's a question that has never been thoroughly investigated.
None of this information that we're speaking about this evening is in the 9/11 Commission report. They simply ignored all of it.
But author James Bamford has investigated and come up with a chilling tale of terrorists living in San Diego, communicating with bin Laden's operations center in Yemen, moving freely about. And all the while, NSA is listening in.
But the NSA never alerted any other agency that the terrorists were in the United States and moving across the country towards Washington.
Since the 9/11 attacks, NSA's role has grown even bigger, along with its license to listen in on Americans here and abroad.
It was incredibly uncomfortable to be listening to private personal conversations of Americans, and it's almost like going through and finding somebody's diary.
But is this flood of information making America any safer? Looking in to the Spy Factory, right now on Nova.
Major funding for Nova is provided by the following.
15 minutes between Braddock Road and 66, and that's St. Barnabas Road. DC 295 split. The other southbound Baltimore-Washington Parkway as you come up on Route 50.
On the southbound lane of the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, traffic is stalled as commuters crowd down a special restricted exit that disappears into the thick woods. Beyond, hidden from view and protected by electrified fences and heavily armed guards, is the largest, most secret, and most technologically advanced intelligence agency in the world, the National Security Agency, NSA. Its mission, making and breaking codes, tapping into foreign signals, sifting through the international phone calls, emails, text, and instant messages that blanket the modern world. Every day, more than 20,000 people flood into this secret city. Unlike undercover CIA operatives spying in hostile territory, NSA spies use technology in what is believed to be the largest collection of mathematicians, linguists, and computer scientists on the planet. Author James Bamford has written about NSA for the past 25 years.
For those in the know, the joke was always that NSA stood for no such agency. For those on the inside, the joke was that NSA stood for never say anything. During the Cold War, NSA circled nearly the entire Soviet Union with listening posts to intercept military and diplomatic communications. NSA even listened in on Soviet leaders calling to the Kremlin from their limousines. At its headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, NSA used acres of supercomputers to break any coded communications.
But when the Soviet Union collapsed, a new enemy emerged. One NSA was never designed to engage. That enemy was Al-Qaeda. Eric Hasseltine was NSA's director of research.
The Russians were easy to find and hard to kill, and terrorists are hard to find and easy to kill.
Unlike the Soviets, Al-Qaeda was a small, scattered, moving target. Headquartered in remote mountain training camps, its soldiers communicated by cell and satellite phones.
And if you look at the job of NSA to find the enemy, they had to go from looking at an enemy that they kind of knew who they were and where they were, to one that they didn't know who they were or where they were or how they communicated.
For NSA, the challenge was to change tactics to match an increasingly dangerous adversary. In cities across Asia and the Middle East, Al-Qaeda operatives were using public payphones and internet cafes to plan a series of strikes that would culminate in the 9/11 attacks.
At that point, it was a race. It was a race between how much could we rebuild and have the type of capabilities that you need against an individual or a small group of individuals who operate around the world and pay little attention to borders. Can you do that, and can you rebuild the intelligence community in time?
Those questions still resonate today. Was the National Security Agency, the organization responsible for intercepting foreign calls and messages, listening in on Al-Qaeda prior to 9/11? What role did the NSA play? And are we any safer today? Surprisingly, the 9/11 Commission never investigated the NSA's role as fully as it did those of the CIA or FBI. But by carefully piecing together a variety of unclassified public records, the story of NSA and its role in the war on terror emerges.
In my research, I used thousands of documents available in the public record. They included intelligence agency memos, transcripts of terrorist trials, and a secret FBI chronology of the 9/11 terrorist movements obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. One fact is clear from these sources: they were monitoring the Al-Qaeda leader long before 9/11.
In November 1996, a known Al-Qaeda contact buys an Inmarsat satellite phone from a store in a New York suburb. That phone is for Osama bin Laden. Once he starts dialing from Afghanistan, NSA's listening posts quickly tap into his conversations. Analysts at the CIA, like Michael Scheuer, head of Alex Station, the CIA's newly formed bin Laden tracking unit, are also eager to get the information.
Osama bin Laden's Inmarsat telephone was really a godsend. It gave us an idea not only of where he was in Afghanistan, but where Al-Qaeda as an organization was established, because there were calls to various places in the world.
For NSA, tapping into satellite calls is a basic tactic in what's known as signals intelligence. Inmarsat phones transmit signals straight to a satellite orbiting over the Indian Ocean. By tracking all calls in and out of Afghanistan, the NSA quickly determines bin Laden's number: 873-682-505-331. Once they have this, they home in on both sides of his conversations, listening to bin Laden by means of a huge dish in space, and to the person he's speaking to with a dish-shaped antenna on the ground.
In the intelligence business, signals intelligence is among the most important kind of intelligence options that you have.
Hello.
Electronic communications that are in the air.
I've been baking cookies today.
Whether from telephone to telephone,
Oatmeal raisins.
from satellite to satellite, from Inmarsat radio to Inmarsat radio. And NSA collects those with a very broad array of electronic collection capability. But once you collect them, all you have is the signals. And ultimately, it all comes down to the human being.
Human analysts plot out which numbers are being called from bin Laden's phone and how frequently. They quickly discover that most of the calls from bin Laden's phone in Afghanistan are going to a house in Yemen, 2,000 miles to the south.
Yemen is central to understanding how Al-Qaeda operates. It's where Osama bin Laden's father was born and raised. It has a culture of clans and secrets. It didn't surprise me that bin Laden chose its capital city, Sana'a, for his logistics and communications headquarters. What was surprising was that I found it tucked away in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. The headquarters was hidden in a small, undistinguished house the CIA said was the home of one of bin Laden's closest associates.
Bin Laden's phone calls aren't encrypted, so there is no code for NSA's supercomputers to break. Instead, NSA voice interceptors and linguists painstakingly translate, transcribe, and write summaries of the calls. The summaries are shared with the CIA, but its analysts at Alex Station want more. They believe that only by carefully studying each word will it be possible to understand bin Laden's intentions.
Over time, if you read enough of these conversations, you first get clued into the fact that maybe a bottle of milk doesn't mean bottle of milk. And if you follow it long enough, you develop a sense of what they're really talking about. But it's not possible to do unless you have the verbatim transcript. We went to Fort Meade to ask the NSA's Deputy Director of Operations for the transcripts, and she said, "We are not going to share that with you." And that was the end.
NSA declined Nova's repeated requests for interviews, but its policy since its founding has been to never share raw data, even with other intelligence agencies. Scheuer is so determined to get it, he persuades the CIA to build its own ground station. But without a satellite, he can only get half of the conversations.
We would collect it, translate it, send it to NSA, and ask for them for the other half of it so we could better understand it. But we never got it.
A terrorist attack on Americans half a world away.
August 7th, 1998. Al-Qaeda strikes 2 U.S. embassies in East Africa.
The principal suspect is Osama bin Laden.
Both NSA and CIA are monitoring the Al-Qaeda network, but neither gives any warning of the 2 precisely timed attacks.
Truth of the matter is, though, we had various reports from human intelligence sources within East Africa that there was an Al-Qaeda operation brewing somewhere on the east coast of Africa. We could never really pin it down.
The embassy attacks are technically on American soil, so the FBI is called in and finds out about the house in Yemen.
I first learned about the communication center in Yemen when I got to Nairobi after the embassy bombing there. That house was a focal point for operatives in the field to call in. That number would then contact bin Laden to pass along information and receive instruction back.
With only a handful of ways to pin down bin Laden's location, reconnaissance satellites, spies on the ground, and signals intelligence, NSA's expertise is becoming increasingly important.
If you've only got very few people who are hiding out in a cave somewhere, you're looking for a very small target and very few targets, as opposed to a big army division or a big missile complex. So imagery intelligence was of relatively less value. Human intelligence in an environment where a terrorist network is all relatives, blood relatives, it becomes tougher to get information in that kind of network. I think one interpretation was that NSA understood that they were becoming more important in the grand scheme of things in the war on terror.
An American ship is attacked in Yemen.
October 12th, 2000, Al-Qaeda strikes again. This time it's an attack on the USS Cole, moored off the coast of Yemen.
Yemen's port authority had been penetrated. Immediately suspect Osama bin Laden.
Once again, the U.S. intelligence community fails to give a timely warning of the attack. Frank Blanco, NSA's executive director at the time, says NSA was still confronting terrorist tactics with Cold War technology.
You've got targets that are very mobile. They use a variety of communications, which are cell phones, laptops. NSA had to begin to think about what is the real technology that is necessary and how much is it going to cost and where do we get the money?
Money is a pressing issue. After the Cold War, Congress had reduced NSA's budget by 1/3, while criticizing it for violating privacy laws.
Concerned about the privacy rights of American citizens.
There is no legitimate excuse for that.
It is intolerable to think of the United States government, of Big Brother, or anybody else.
By law, NSA was prohibited from spying on American soil without approval from a special court created by FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
When I interviewed General Michael Hayden, the head of the NSA, I was surprised when he told me that they were monitoring less than half a dozen people in the United States. He was very busy fighting Hollywood's image of NSA, like you saw in the movie Enemy of the State.
The National Security Agency conducts worldwide surveillance, fax, phones, satellite communication. The only ones in the country, including the military, could possibly have anything like this.
Hold that coordinate. All right, lab 39 degrees, 27 minutes.
To us in the intelligence community, movies like Enemy of the State are quite amusing because it made us look omniscient. We could collect anything we wanted, and it's just not that way. It's not that way at all. You may collect a lot of stuff, but you don't know what you've got. Really, the biggest technology challenge was how do you deal with volumes of information like that? And find dots, connect dots, understand dots. That's the problem.
In late December 1999, NSA finds one very important dot. It intercepts an alarming call to the house in Yemen, instructing 2 Al-Qaeda foot soldiers to fly to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for what sounds like a terrorist summit. The foot soldiers are Khalid al-Midar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. This is the phone call that sets in motion the 9/11 attacks.
After picking up this critical call, NSA passed on their first names to the FBI and the CIA, but not their last names. Nawaf's last name had been in NSA's database for over a year because of his association with bin Laden's operations center in Yemen. But apparently the NSA never looked it up.
The CIA does find al-Midar's name in its database. They ask security agents to make a copy of his passport as he passes through a checkpoint in Dubai. When analysts at CIA headquarters see it, they are astonished to find a valid U.S. visa inside. Alex Station, the CIA's bin Laden unit, now has 2 FBI agents detailed to it, Doug Miller and Mark Rossini.
Once they arrived in Kuala Lumpur, of course, CIA requested the intelligence service over there in Malaysia to conduct surveillance of these subjects and find out as much as they can. They took photographs, followed them, and you read from that one of the individuals had a visa to come to the U.S.
Fearing an Al-Qaeda terrorist may be headed to the U.S., the agents are determined to tell the FBI, but a CIA official will not allow it.
I guess I was the more senior agent. So I went up to the individual that had the ticket on the Yemeni cell, the Yemeni operatives, and I said to her, I said, what's going on? You know, we got to tell the Bureau about this. These guys clearly are bad. One of them at least has a multiple entry visa to the U.S. We got to tell the FBI. And then she said to me, no, it's not the FBI's case, not the FBI's jurisdiction. So I go tell Doug, and I'm like, Doug, what can we do? If we had picked up the phone and called the Bureau, I would have been violating the law. I would have broken the law. I would have been removed from the building that day. I would have had my clearances suspended, and I would have been gone.
This is one of the most astonishing parts of the story. The CIA had FBI operatives working within their bin Laden unit. But when the FBI operatives found out that one and possibly 2 of the terrorists had visas to the United States, were heading for the United States, the CIA wouldn't let them tell their headquarters that they were coming. Only the FBI could have put out alerts to stop Khalid al-Midar and Nawaf al-Hazmi if they tried to enter the United States.
January 15th, 2000, Los Angeles International Airport. United Airlines Flight 2 arrives from Bangkok, where the CIA lost al-Midar and al-Hazmi's trail. They pass through U.S. immigration undetected. Within 2 weeks, they move into the anonymity of a San Diego suburb.
The FBI put together its chronology as part of its investigation. into the 9/11 attack. The timeline, the declassified copy, is the movements and the activities of the hijackers while they're in the U.S., hiding in plain sight.
They get driver's licenses in their own names. They use a local bank to pick up international wire transfers from a known al-Qaeda finance chief. Their telephone number is even listed in the San Diego white pages. Al-Hazmi Nawaf M, 858-279-5919.
The CIA was forbidden from operating within the United States, and the FBI didn't know they were here. So the only way to trap the terrorists was if NSA continued to monitor their conversations as they called back to the house in Yemen.
But 9 days after Al-Hazmi and Al-Midar arrive in California, the NSA has a catastrophic failure.
I remember getting a phone call on January 24th, 2000 that began with, "We have a problem." NSA systems had actually stopped working.
The most technologically advanced intelligence agency in the world, capable of monitoring millions of simultaneous conversations, is deaf.
NSA was brain dead. It took probably 3 to 4, maybe even 5 days to bring everything back up the way it was.
It is unclear whether during those 5 days NSA misses any calls from the hijackers in San Diego, but what is certain, as the FBI chronology spells out, is that the hijackers waste no time settling into their new neighborhood.
Here, as it says in the chronology, February 5th, 2000, Al-Midar signed a lease to rent an apartment at 6401 Mount Otter Road in San Diego. February 25th, Al-Midar purchased the Toyota Corolla in San Diego, California. February 28th, records at Progressive Insurance Company verify Al-Midhar's insurance policy number 604-725-921-0, Huggy Bear Insurance Corporation. March 20th, the San Diego telephone number associated with Nawaf al-Hazmi made a call which lasted 16 minutes to Yemen.
That is one of many calls made from San Diego to bin Laden's operations center, the house in Yemen that NSA has been monitoring for over 3 years. But NSA would not pass on that information to any other intelligence agency. Eleanor Hill investigated NSA's role in 9/11 for Congress.
We were very surprised to learn that, they had this information, and if there are contacts from known terrorists in the United States with terrorist facilities abroad, that's exactly the kind of information our intelligence community needs to have. They didn't have it.
You put the NSA intel and the FBI intel together, you have both sides of the conversation. So they come in, we follow them, find out where they're going, listen to their home, listen to their conversations at their home, or their cell phone, whatever, emails. The possibilities are endless once you're able to peer into someone's life.
Incredibly, the NSA never informed the FBI that these calls were coming from the United States, and we may never know why. No one from NSA will discuss it, and the 9/11 Commission never investigated it. They either didn't realize the two terrorists were calling from the United States, which is hard to believe because even I have caller ID which shows where a call is coming from, or what's more likely is that they ignored it because they would have had to hand the contacts over to the FBI.
April 12, 2000, almost 3 months after the hijackers arrive in the U.S., NSA Director Michael Hayden hints at another possible explanation for NSA's silence. Already warned by Congress to respect Americans' privacy rights, Hayden responds to the House Intelligence Committee with extreme caution.
Let me put a fine point on this. If, as we are speaking here this afternoon, Osama bin Laden is walking across the Peace Bridge from Niagara Falls, Ontario to Niagara Falls, New York, as he gets to the New York side, he is an American person, and my agency must respect his rights against unreasonable search and seizure as provided by the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution.
But General Hayden knew the law permitted the agency to eavesdrop on the terrorists without interruption if they entered the United States.
You could link back who they were, their connection to bin Laden, connection to the Yemeni house, etc. You could have gone to any court, and any judge in the FISA court and say, we want a FISA on that resident of San Diego. It would have been easy. And we would have surveilled them. and we would have learned more information. People who are going to watch this, they're going to say, oh, it's hindsight 2020, but no. I'm not talking hindsight 2020. I'm talking basic logical investigation.
Again, the FBI chronology, compiled after the 9/11 attacks, describes precisely how Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi begin training for their 9/11 operation.
April 4th, 2000, Nawaf Al-Hazmi received 1 hour of introductory flight instruction from the National Air College located at 3760 Glenn Curtis Road, San Diego. May 4th, Khalid Al-Midhar debit card purchase, 2 Jepson training kits. June 10, 2000, Al-Midhar departs the U.S. via Lufthansa Flight 457 from Los Angeles, California to Frankfurt, Germany.
Khalid Al-Midar is heading home to see a newborn son. For the next 13 months, he will live with his wife and baby in the house in Yemen. The house NSA is monitoring. He will even apply for a new U.S. visa, and incredibly, he will get it. December 8th, 2000. Hani Hanjour, another 9/11 hijacker, touches down in San Diego. 3 days later, he joins Nawaf Al-Hazmi on a road trip to New Jersey, where the rest of the hijackers are assembling. Once more, the FBI chronology compiled after the attacks documents their 5-month trip.
March 1st, 2001, Hanjour has 8 hours of simulator training at Jet Tech. April 1st, Nawaf Al-Hazmi received a speeding ticket and received a summons for failure to wear his seatbelt. May 1st, Al-Hazmi filed a police report with the Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department alleging he was mugged by an unknown black man.
June 21st, 2001, a reporter from the Middle East Broadcasting Corporation interviews bin Laden's lieutenants in Afghanistan. They hint that a major attack may soon take place. U.S. forces in the Mideast are put on the highest alert. After the interview is released, NSA's traffic analysis detects a huge spike of threatening communications.
There was a great anticipation that there was going to be an attack on U.S. interests by al-Qaeda. Most people believed it was going to be overseas. And so tragically, their focus was on their job, which was with looking overseas, and not so much on what was happening in the U.S., which they viewed as the FBI's job.
As the chronology goes on, July 4th, 2001, Al-Midhar entered U.S. on Saudi Arabian Flight 53 via JFK in New York City using a B-1 business visa and listing his intended address as the Marriott Hotel, New York City. That was the Marriott Hotel at the World Trade Center.
To make final preparations for their attack, Al-Hazmi, Al-Midar, and Hanjour drive south on the New Jersey Turnpike. They avoid staying in large cities. They avoid hotel chains with computerized registration. Instead, the crew drives into the Maryland town of Laurel and checks into the low-budget Valencia motel. By now, they have their final assignment, targeting the Pentagon.
Throughout their whole journey, whether they were in San Diego, or they were in New Jersey, or they were in Laurel, Maryland, they were communicating back and forth to the bin Laden Ops Center in Yemen. NSA was listening in on the Ops Center, recording the conversations and then transcribing them. But the NSA never alerted any other agency that the terrorists were in the United States and moving across the country towards Washington.
On the face of it, Laurel, Maryland looks like a typical Washington suburb.
What's very different is that this town happens to be right next door to NSA's headquarters.
While NSA has detected a spike in communications threatening an imminent attack, bin Laden's hitmen have taken refuge right in their own backyard.
August 18th, Alejandro rented mailbox number 433, the day before the hijacking. Nawaf Al-Hazmi, Walmart, 3665, Food Factory, Khalil Midhar. 9/6/2001, Nawaf Al-Hazmi, Khalil Midhar, Alejandro, Gold's Gym, Greenbelt, Maryland.
The hijackers seemed to blend in very well. Even when they shopped for improvised weapons for the hijackings, they shopped in a Target store just down the street from NSA. No one thought what they were doing was suspicious. So here you have these two groups of people. One, the terrorists who are plotting the largest terrorist operation in U.S. history. And you have NSA, which have been listening to some of their phone calls for years. And now they're living side by side, neither of them knowing that the other is there. What was really tragic is that if General Hayden had looked out his 8th floor window west towards Laurel, just 2 miles away, he could have almost seen the motel in which the hijackers were living. I mean, it's one of the biggest ironies in the history of American intelligence.
On the day of the 9/11 attacks, most of NSA's employees are ordered to leave their headquarters. Afraid that NSA might be another target, some of the few who remain move from their upstairs offices to lower floors. Others tack up black curtains to block their windows. They seem to have no idea what their own agency and the CIA both knew, but had said nothing about.
Had we been able to realize how significant that was, put it together, and get it to the agencies who could have made use of it in time, would there have been a different end to the 9/11 story?
I can't come up with a rational reason why I didn't break the rules and pick up the phone and tell that the hijackers, or really bad guys, are in the U.S. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to come to terms with that. I don't know. I really don't know.
On the 13th of September, I gave an address to an empty room, but we beamed it throughout our entire enterprise about free people's always having to decide to balance their security and their liberties. And then I told the workforce, there are going to be a lot of pressures to push that banner down toward security. And our job at NSA was to keep America free by making Americans feel safe again.
Those pressures aren't long in coming. When Hayden is asked by Vice President Cheney what more NSA can do, he answers not much, without breaking FISA laws, the laws that force NSA to obtain a warrant to listen in on Americans. 3 weeks after the attacks, President Bush bypasses those laws by secretly issuing an executive order. NSA will no longer have to worry about obtaining warrants to eavesdrop inside America. If 9/11 was a wake-up call, the response is a license to listen to almost anything and everything.
And part of that wake-up call, certainly right after 9/11, included the fact that you needed to take some strict measures. You needed to take some action that would allow you to not let that happen again.
But to make the new program work, Hayden must finally bring the National Security Agency into the modern age. The backbone of global communications had moved from easily intercepted satellite signals in space to fiber optic cables buried under the ocean. To understand the challenge NSA faces, NOVA follows one email message as it circles the globe. In Malaysia's capital city of Kuala Lumpur, James Bamford is researching Al-Qaeda's communications network. In a busy cafe, he types out an email message to Nova's producers in Boston. Bamford's message is harmless, but contains the kinds of keywords and phrases that NSA supercomputers are programmed to detect. Phrases like blow up the White House, destroy the Capitol building, biological warfare. When he presses send, Bamford's message is instantly mixed in with dozens of other messages on the same wireless network, then routed to a large telecommunications center in the city. There, voice calls are converted from analog to digital signals and streamed as pulses of light through a fiber optic cable that dives into the South China Sea off Malaysia's coast. Along the way, Bamford's message is merged with thousands of phone calls, emails, and faxes in dozens of languages from hundreds of Asian cities. The jumble of data crosses under the Pacific Ocean at the speed of light. Just 5/100ths of a second after the message was sent, it comes ashore 6 feet under this lonely stretch of California beach near Morro Bay. There, beneath screeching gulls and surfers in wetsuits, Asian communications stream in. A few miles inland, the message passes through a small, nondescript building near San Luis Obispo.
If you want to tap into international communications, it seems like the perfect place is San Luis Obispo. That's where 80% of all communications from Asia enter the United States.
But under NSA's new orders, they don't tap in here. Instead, the cables run straight from San Luis Obispo to a building in San Francisco. The building at 611 Folsom Street is AT&T's regional switching center. All the international traffic snakes up to the 7th floor, and it is here that a crucial change takes place. The 7th floor is also where AT&T's domestic traffic is routed. A cacophony of millions of conversations. Cries and laughter, hopes and dreams, emails, faxes, bank statements, hotel reservations, love poems, and death notices. All sent by people from inside the United States. The only thing they have in common is a reasonable expectation of privacy. In 2003, an AT&T engineer notices that the cables on the 7th floor have been rerouted, and a mirror image of all the traffic, both domestic and international, is now being sent to a secret room 1 floor below.
It was obvious that this was some kind of NSA installation. I figured out that what they were doing was a blind, wholesale copying of the entire internet data flow. And this meant randomly scooping up huge amounts of purely domestic data as well as international data.
When I hear the word wiretap, I've always imagined some person in a trench coat and a black hat and sunglasses skulking around after dark, secretly tapping into a wire and hoping that no one notices. But what they've done in that facility is, by full light of day, they've cut the fiber optic cables and then reconnected them in a splitter. What they have built is a facility that is capable of monitoring absolutely all data communication through it.
Brian Reed, a communications expert, has examined AT&T's internal documents that Klein provided. They show that the secret room contains electronic equipment specifically designed for signals intelligence. Equipment programmed to sift through millions of messages, searching for keywords like the ones Bamford sent from Kuala Lumpur.
The most curious piece of equipment in that room is a completely flexible monitoring system that can be told on a moment's notice Please monitor all conversation that contains the word hummingbird. Please monitor all conversation that goes to Mobile, Alabama. Please monitor all conversations that contain both the word hummingbird and go to Mobile, Alabama.
NSA has turned its giant ear to listen in on America.
Based on everything I know, I believe that there are between 15 and 30 of these secret rooms around the U.S.
The post-9/11 rules authorized NSA to listen in to Americans both inside and outside the U.S. without any special court approval.
After 9/11, we were essentially put in charge of a new system which intercepted satellite phone communications in Iraq and Afghanistan and surrounding areas.
Calls and data from the Middle East and North Africa are collected and relayed to a listening post tucked in the hills outside Augusta, Georgia. As a voice interceptor, Adrian Kinney listened to some of those calls. Assigned by the Army to NSA, she was called back to active duty after 9/11.
For a voice interceptor, the computer system would essentially pop up, and it would be very similar, I would say, to iTunes, where you could just go through and click on various conversations, and it would have the phone number, the time up, time down.
Yeah, it's over. We had a little barbecue.
We were told that we were to listen to all conversations that were intercepted, to include those of Americans and other allied countries.
Some of those conversations are personal,
The basement.
some even intimate.
And there was no directive to say that when you had conversations like this come through that you should delete them. That's what we did when I was on active duty in 94 to 98. We would never collect on an American. I had a real problem with the fact that people were listening to it and that I was listening to it. The time that that interceptor, that voice interceptor, is spending listening to conversations in the States, that's time that they can't spend looking or listening for actual conversations related to terrorist organizations.
As NSA began tapping into fiber optic cables as well as satellites, information began to flood in like never before. According to a congressional study in 2008, some intelligence data sources grow at a rate of 4 petabytes. That's 4 quadrillion bytes per month. The equivalent of 12 filing cabinets of new information for every American citizen every year. But what does it all mean?
Computers today tell people what things are. Here's some data that you asked for. They don't tell you what it means. So there is some work going on to try to marry the power of computers to the power of humans.
Specialized software can help extract important information based on context and meaning. Dr. Robert L. Popp does advanced research on these kinds of programs, known as classifiers.
Say you wanted to build a classifier for Al-Qaeda, the concept Al-Qaeda. The way it would work is you as an analyst would go find all these documents, whether they're emails or things on the web or whatever, but all these documents that in your judgment are narratives associated with the concept of Al-Qaeda.
In the future, by refining the software and harnessing enough computing power, these classifiers could potentially reduce the mountain of information human analysts have to examine.
So the next frontier may be, computer, do you see any unusual associations that I didn't think to ask you about, that I ought to have asked you about when it relates to a threat against the homeland?
But most experts agree that may take decades, and it could only help mine information in documents, emails, and faxes. When it comes to human conversations, technology is of little help. It still takes people wearing headphones and listening in.
I decided a couple weeks after 9/11 to enlist and go to Arabic, and I hoped to go hunt Osama at that time.
David Murphy Falk was one of the thousands of new linguists trained to work in the trenches of NSA's signals intelligence operations.
NSA spends literally billions of dollars to obtain signals, to process them, move them from place to place without people knowing, to get them to an end user, a translator, who can make some sense of them and write up a transcription. What I found was a large number of translators simply not meeting minimal requirements in language skills, basically running some very expensive, very complicated equipment without the kind of knowledge or context that they would need to do that properly.
Before 9/11, the budget for U.S. intelligence was $26.7 billion. By 2008, that budget nearly doubled. NSA's portion is secret, but believed to be over a third. More than the Departments of Treasury, Interior, or Labor. Its ranks have swelled to over 35,000.
Given all the additional money spent now on rebuilding the intelligence community and its capabilities, are we really safer as a nation? I think generally for me the answer is yes. The fact that we haven't had another attack, the fact that we have better coordination and better information sharing, are we to the point where we can relax and put our guard down? No. I think if we do, then we run the risk of changing the answer.
It's very, very hard to draw a hard and fast line between where foreign intelligence stops and domestic intelligence starts. That doesn't mean that we want our foreign intelligence agencies on every street corner in America, but it does mean that you have to have very good communication and coordination between the foreign intelligence agencies like the CIA and NSA and our domestic agencies like the FBI. Because if you don't, things are going to slip between the cracks, and that's exactly what happened with 9/11.
The problem with reporting on a story like this is that you're really searching in the dark. There's no way to sit on the outside and really know what's going on the inside. And without an official inquiry, some questions can't be answered. Why did the NSA fail to act or pass on information that could have warned of 9/11? Why didn't it share information with the CIA and FBI that could possibly have stopped the plot? As for the question of whether we are any safer now than we were before, we should have been safe the way it was. NSA had all the information it needed to stop the hijackers, and it already had laws that allowed it to track them. So now with NSA's new rules, with all the money it's spent, with all the data it collects, is NSA doing a better job? Or is this job that much harder because it's just being flooded with data? How much information is enough? And won't too much information end up making the world more dangerous?
On Nova's Spy Factory website, dig deeper into this topic with original content, including interactives, interviews, and more. Find it on pbs.org.